Nkrumah, I want to start first of all, this is just out of curiosity. As a son of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, how do you feel each year when we go through this constant cycle of debate over your father's legacy and his role in our independence struggle?
Yes, first of all, I think when you were introducing me earlier, you said a man who knows Nkrumah very well and so on. And surprisingly, I didn't know Nkrumah at all. I was 2 years old when he was overthrown in 1966. And when we lived in exile in Egypt with my mother and two siblings, we never saw him. He was in Guinea-Conakry, and we never saw him. He only wrote letters to us, and that was about it. So I didn't know the man at all, and there's no really emotional connection there. But of course, being the son of such a great person who's larger than life, obviously will put some, not pressure, it doesn't put pressure on me, but kind of makes you reflect on his life of a great man, especially that he comes from very humble background. So it's kind of interesting to see such a village boy, if I may put it that way, to grow up to be an international figure who represented not only Ghana, not only Africa, but the whole Black race. So it's very humbling to be the son of such a leader. But at the same time, I'm aware of his position. I'm aware of his struggles, political struggles, the sacrifices he made, the sacrifices we made as his kids, his wife and all that. And also put in the big context, I appreciate the good part of Nkrumah and also the bad part of Nkrumah. So I try to be as objective as possible. And of course, I'm used to when you debate Nkrumah, you realize that I never refer to him as my father because I think he's the father of a nation. So I'm open to discussions and criticism and all of that.
Yeah, but I'm so curious. Of course, still you are a son. What emotions go through when you hear this debate every year?
I'm not a very emotional person, so not really much, because I understand. I grew up, from a young age, I started reading books that were actually against Nkrumah. The first political book I read was by Lee Okran, one of the leaders of the 1966 coup, which completely condemned Nkrumah and so on. I also used to look through cartoons that were running down Nkrumah. I'm not sure what it was, Ganata or something of the sort. Mocked Nkrumah completely and so on. Before I started reading Nkrumah's books and learning about the man and so on. So I think I keep an open mind, look at both sides of the coin. I try to be as objective as I can.
Something that the president said on Sunday when he delivered his national address on the Founders' Day, S'. He says, "I speak to you this evening rejecting completely the notion that Ghana was founded by one man." You agree with him?
Oh, definitely not. I think what the president completely misses is that Nkrumah was one man, but he represented millions of Ghanaians. And that was exactly the grassroots connection Nkrumah had with the masses. He was brought in by the UGCC. He was active in the Pan-African movement in the UK after he had left the US. And I would later kind of go into his 10 years in the US, because I think that's what made Nkrumah. So they brought him in, and they needed his help. And the UGCC was the biggest political movement, but its presence across the country was not big enough. I think, if I remember correctly, they were just active in 6 constituencies or so across the country. And Nkrumah came, he did the legwork, went across the country, mobilized people, energized the whole struggle for independence, and kind of took over the leadership. After breaking away and forming his CPP, took the largest chunk of he created the mass movement. So obviously when he broke away, the majority went with him, and he convincingly won the 51, 54, and 56 elections. So the point here is that what the president is missing is that Nkrumah is not one man. Nkrumah represents millions of Ghanaians. And it's that elitist mentality and entitlement. Because quite recently, I gave an interview or granted an interview concerning this subject. And I was saying, I guess he's caught up in the emotions of the past. And I'm very sensitive to it because you see, it was a difficult period for Ghana. I was a baby then, but I mean, Ghanaians who lived at the time. And the political violence that emerged from the rivalry of the UP and CPP. Eventually, I think I blame both sides, the political violence. In Nkrumah, yes, there were several attempts on his life. Started with a bomb in Newtown where he lived, his residence. But the introduction of the PDA, I think also from Nkrumah's side, he was trying to arrest the violence. But from the opposition side, kind of, many became victims. And I always say, and that's why I earlier said I'm very sensitive to it, is that 3 out of the big 6 ended up in political detention under Nkrumah, Obichwe Lamte, Dankwa himself, and Akwaje, who actually suggested Nkrumah's name to come and become the general secretary.